You know, I was thinking, I have never been to a rodeo in my life, but I do work in Washington, D.C., and I do hear a lot of bullshit, so that's... So bullshit is not anything that I am unfamiliar with. Let me thank all those in the state of Texas. And let me begin by making a dramatic announcement. You ready? Yeah. We're going to win the state of Texas. Yeah, we will. See, and I'll tell you.
Bernie Sanders is dominating everywhere. It is easier to talk about the places where he is not dominating as opposed to the places where he is dominating. I mean, ultimately, you're talking about the overwhelming majority of the states. He could literally, in real terms, run the table. I was looking at the polling after the last two elections in Iowa and New Hampshire where he wins both. He gets a modest bump from Iowa. He gets a pretty decent bump from New Hampshire. But it's not just the decent bump he gets from New Hampshire. It's also this notion that he is piling up steam as he goes into the next few states. I want to show you some of the polling that has taken place. I want to show you some that has taken place nationally, but also in the various states. It is phenomenal. He is right now in Texas, and you can hear in the tone of his voice a certain resoluteness, a certain confidence. Well, that confidence is effectively bought from winning. I'm going to give a few predictions also of what is going to take place going forward in the race. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal patron. So this week has been extremely busy, but going into the next week, the show starts. So just as an update, from Monday through Friday, from here on out, with the exception of tomorrow, from 12 to 2, the show is going to start. Tuesday is going to be our first day launch. It's called the Progressive Misfits. Myself and Bob are going to be real radio station, Washington, D.C. area, Maryland, and Northern Virginia. But all of the broadcasts will be coming through this channel from 12 to 2, and you guys are encouraged to call in with questions or comments or any of those things. I'm hoping to have a really good turnout. We'll still be reading your super chats. We're going to have a tweet channel and all this other stuff for you guys to also communicate. But yes, you can also call in to the show. Also, the contributor appreciation is going to be tomorrow. I have several makeup shows that I need to do today. And so Mrs. Thomas and I are going to get contributor appreciation tomorrow. I don't have to work tomorrow. She does, I think, but she'll be free in the evening. So we'll do it that way. Before I start anything else and going into the other shows, though, I wanted to discuss context, meaning the context currently of this particular race. Democrats are freaking out. News media is freaking out. They're trying to do anything in their power to stop Sanders at this point because, like I said before, he's dominating all over. It's not just one or two states. Remember what I mentioned before. National polling has a tendency to lie sometimes because those races are determined in the states. So as you go from state to state to state, you get a certain momentum and a head of steam as you're plowing through the next state. The issue is I don't see who stops him, with the exception of maybe Bloomberg being the Democratic Party's failsafe. And I'll explain what I mean. Let's start here, though. He's in Texas, and what did he say? We're going to win Texas! He was even using his Batman voice. That's when you know he's feeling it. This is Texas. Sanders, up 12. Up 12. Biden down 1. Sanders takes the lead in Texas. Warren, down 3, continues her slide, her trend. Bloomberg, 10% is new. Buttigieg, 7%. Meaning, Sanders and Biden are the only two in Texas that have a chance. And Sanders has taken the lead. Let's keep going. There's more. There's more. This is Morning Consult. After the New Hampshire primary process where Sanders wins, Sanders takes a double-digit lead in the national polling. Now, keep in mind, Biden had been winning the national polling going back for like a year and was winning it strongly in somewhat of a dominant fashion. And what did you see take place? Quinnipiac, I think it was Monmouth, but it was like multiple polls. USA Today, Reuters, all of these polls were showing Sanders for the first time taking a clear lead in those polls. He takes New Hampshire. Biden deflates. Now keep in mind, the thing that was keeping Biden afloat was this notion of electability. And what did I say? Trends are infinitely important, and when those trends break, you get movement within the context of the field. He opens up a 10-point lead in the field. I'm going to bounce back to this one for a moment, but I want to show a part of this. Let's go to this notion of electability, because I kind of want to make a point. Joe Biden's was living entirely on the notion of electability. And the problem for Joe Biden is that because he was living off of electability, he had nothing else to run on. Meaning he had gotten rid of, he was eschewing policy. He wasn't, his thing was, I'm the guy that can beat Trump. I'm the guy that can beat Trump. Why can you beat Trump? I just can. Wait, you can beat Trump because you can beat Trump? As opposed to having something to underpin that. Meaning if Sanders is saying, we beat Trump and we win by going through this list of policies that materially benefit the population itself. That's how we win. Expanding healthcare, expanding Social Security, paying off school loans, et cetera, et cetera. Essentially things that dramatically and materially affect the population itself. That's how we win. People might have considered him risky, but from a policy standpoint, they agreed with him. Meaning, the moment that the media started looking at Sanders and saying this guy could potentially win, well, it flips. Just the very change like that gets across to the population that he's a contender, despite the fact that he was either number 1 or number 2 in the polls at this point. Meaning that the thing that was undergirding Biden's campaign was entirely electability. And that trend has broken. Look at this. Joe Biden isn't so electable anymore. So after Iowa, and this is after New Hampshire, Sanders, if you notice, went up 6. Bloomberg goes from 18% to 25%, but he didn't participate in either election. He was just spending money around. But look at Joe Biden. Joe Biden started at 29% in Iowa and then dropped to 17% after New Hampshire. Again, Sanders, his electability was lower than Joe Biden's, but higher than most. But if you notice, his electability after New Hampshire went to where Joe Biden was before Iowa. He's effectively subsumed Joe Biden's role in the context of electability. Joe Biden drops all the way down to 17%. Why is that important? It's important because Joe Biden was winning electability by like 20 points, 20, 30 points. And you would have a poll where electability would be the thing that would put Joe Biden over. So Joe Biden might be ahead, let's say 4 points in the polls, but he was winning by 20 points in terms of electability. And so right off the bat, you think, well, if electability goes away and all of these other policy priorities that are put forth, the public is not buying Joe Biden as being one of the mainstays for those policies, and electability is the only thing he got. If electability crumbles, like it has, then Joe Biden has difficulties, which is literally what you are currently seeing in the race. Joe Biden is not so electable anymore. Now, think about what I've also said about the black vote. Who keeps the monsters at bay? Who keeps the monsters at bay? African Americans, especially the youth vote, goes predominantly to Bernie Sanders. Now, when you get into the older vote, that's when you get this kind of skew towards Joe Biden. But there's no issue with blacks voting for Sanders. And if you're talking about the policy positions, they're perfectly fine with his policy positions. The catch, who keeps the monsters at bay? When Joe Biden was the guy that kept the monsters at bay, then Joe Biden was getting those votes in spades. The moment that Joe Biden couldn't keep the monsters at bay or the perception changed, look at what happened. This is Morning Consult. Biden, the black vote, 34%. Sanders, 30%. That's only a 4% difference. And understand, for the longest time, Biden was winning the black vote, like in double digits, easy. Sanders, white vote, 28%. Next closest person is 19%. Biden, 15%. Hispanic vote, 48% Sanders. Nobody else is even close. In fact, you can put pretty much everybody in the list together and they barely would touch Sanders. That is dominant. That is a multiracial, working class coalition. Black, white, Hispanic. That's extraordinary. Utterly extraordinary. And if you want to know why Sanders is winning Texas, I would point to you the Hispanic vote. The last poll that I saw with Donald Trump in head-to-head matchups, Trump was destroying everyone in Texas. He was only beating Sanders by 2 in Texas. Again, the Hispanic vote it's dominant. It's outright dominant for Sanders. So here's another one. I'm going to go through these. I'm trying to go through them relatively quick. It's just so many of them. Because again, my argument is he's dominating everywhere. It's not 1 or 2 places. This is Nevada. Nevada is coming up next week. This is a lead in Nevada, 25%, Biden 18%. Now, this is the first poll that we've seen in Nevada for like a month. So the assumption was that Sanders was winning, but that was just an assumption based on the last poll. When the electability argument for Biden crumbled, well, that didn't just crumble in one place, that crumbled everywhere. And because it crumbled everywhere, the fact that he was barely beating in Nevada before Iowa gave rise to this thought, there is no way that this guy who's living off electability, and that argument has just gone bust, is still winning in Nevada. And apparently, he was not. He was not. In fact, Joe Biden didn't even go to Nevada. Joe Biden just went directly to South Carolina. This is a weird plan of action. I mean, ultimately, I think he's thinking, I'll have my last stand in South Carolina. That's the place where I was dominating the most. But wouldn't you want to do that in Nevada? Because understand what's going to happen. If Sanders takes Nevada, which I strongly suspect he will, he is going to run with a head of steam, and that constant rise that he's already been getting is going to go that much higher for a bump as he goes boiling into South Carolina. With that head of steam, especially if you have a poor showing in South Carolina, you are going to have to somehow stop that train and get those people with your notion of electability shaken and in tatters and try to hold off Sanders in South Carolina. And if you cannot hold him off in South Carolina, which I am predicting he will not. He will not. If I'm right and he takes Nevada, he will take South Carolina, especially if Joe Biden ends up with a poor performance in Nevada. And Joe Biden can call it a day at that point. I want you to notice something else with this. I've argued that Buttigieg was not a thing. I've even argued, I think, to some degree, Klobuchar is not a thing. You cannot be in a Democratic primary, get 2% of the black vote, and win the Democratic primary. You just can't. If you're talking about a general election and you're running as a Republican, maybe you could pull that off. But blacks almost vote entirely Democrat, meaning all of that energy is dumped into one emphasis within the context of one party, which means that's a lot of fucking people in one particular party that have a singular, almost singular vote. You cannot ignore that particular total. It is required almost that you are able to get this multiracial coalition in order to get out of the primaries in a Democratic primary. Buttigieg, with 2% of the black vote, was never going to get that. Klobuchar, same thing, was never going to get that. And reality strikes the moment that they hit a state with more than just white people. Buttigieg, 10%. Klobuchar, 10%. Even Steyer is higher. They will go into last place. They will be towards the end. And again, they're going to get bullied from here on out. New Hampshire and Iowa has the whitest populations in the United States. It just so happens that Klobuchar and Buttigieg, All Lives Matter Buttigieg, that's his base. And so Buttigieg was going to get his best performance in those two states. Part of the reason that I wanted him to lose so bad in Iowa, because I would have put a stake in him and that would have ended his campaign. Nevertheless, Nevada, South Carolina, Super Tuesday, he is going to get embarrassed. That's where I'm at. I never thought Buttigieg was a thing, and up to this point, I still don't think Buttigieg is a thing. 538, Nate Silver. So Nate Silver is looking at this race. In fact, South Carolina. Let's go to South Carolina. My argument is that Biden loses South Carolina. Biden is going to have a poor performance in Nevada. He may come in 2, but it's either going to be 2 or 3. Warren has a strong contingent in Nevada, and she's fighting for the state. So it's possible that Warren takes number 2 spot in Nevada and Biden comes in 3rd. That would mean that Sanders is going to go into South Carolina with a head full of steam. And that's a head full of steam with polls already, right now, looking like this. South Carolina, Biden, 28%, down 9. Down 9. Sanders, 20%, up 6. Steyer, 14%, down 5. Buttigieg, 8%, plus 4. The thing I want you to notice, though, is the trend. Look at Biden. He's down 9 in South Carolina. Why? Because Biden is making a poor assumption. Joe Biden thinks the black vote is with him just because the black vote is with him. That's lunacy. It is transactional. As long as you're the guy that can keep the monsters at bay, they will back you, and they will back you in spades. The moment that it seems like somebody else can keep the monsters at bay, and not just somebody else can keep the monsters at bay, but have better policies, then you're going to get a bleed off. Sanders doesn't need to get the entirety of the black vote. What he needs to do, at the very least, is get a significant share. He's already getting the Hispanic vote. He just needs to eat into Biden's numbers. And with the electability collapsing for Biden, there you have it. Joe Biden was leading in South Carolina by, again, 20 or more points. He is down to just 8. If you go to Real Clear Politics and look at South Carolina, look at this. Just 6. 6.5. Biden 25, Sanders 20. Biden 28, Sanders 20. That is extremely close. And again, that's close in the context of him going through Nevada with a win and hitting South Carolina with a head full of steam. And Joe Biden is going to try to hold the line in South Carolina. Good luck. I'm doubtful. Nate Silver is thinking of this, I think, in the same way or similar ways that I am. He's believing he's taking Nevada. And look at this, South Carolina. Why South Carolina? Again, because if you give the premise that he takes South Carolina, you would assume that his momentum would continue, just like it continued after Iowa and New Hampshire, and then Nevada, and then South Carolina is next. You're also going to have a split of the vote with Biden, Steyer, and I don't think Bloomberg is in the race yet. But the point is, the moment that Sanders becomes the front runner, and people start lumping in with the front runner, and they already like his policies, you have a problem. You have a problem. And what is this? California. And what is this? Texas. You have these major, major states that he's being given from the standpoint of he can just outright win these. And if on Super Tuesday, the context of the race changes to a degree where it looks like this guy's the clear runner, front runner, he will be impossible to stop. I said a long time ago that if he takes California, if he takes California, or the path through the nominations through California, but I had to be honest, I didn't consider him being this dominant in the race. It's just extraordinary. Think of how big California is. Think of how big Texas is. If we go to California, $25.8 to 21 Biden. 7-point lead in California. And again, do you really trust the polls if your name is Joe Biden in California, considering what happened in Iowa, considering what happened in New Hampshire, considering what's probably going to happen in Nevada, and what may even take place in South Carolina? If I was Biden, I would be really dodgy with these polls. And something else is happening in South Carolina. Take a look at this. I mean, in California. This is, California is in their early voting. Back in 2016, there were 580,000 ballots at this time, meaning early voting, people come out to cast their ballots. At the same time this year, in 2016, 580,000 were cast. Right now, 830,000 ballots have been cast. In fact, it's more than that. It's over 850,000. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? We saw an influx in the voters going to the polls in New Hampshire. Sanders wins. Sanders has made the argument that if we can expand the electorate, we win. And you have people almost doubling the number of ballots cast in the last presidential election. I would say of anybody, that spells good news for one Bernie Sanders. We don't know that as a flat fact, but I would say that's damn good news. I would rather have that number there than not. Head-to-head matchups. Sanders and Klobuchar, he beats her by 21 points. Sanders and Buttigieg beats him by 17. Sanders Bloomberg beats him by 15. Sanders and Biden beats him by 4. Sanders and Warren beats her by 2. Beats her by 2. She's most competitive against Bernie Sanders. Isn't that fucking interesting? Now, I think a lot of that, and unfortunately for Warren, it's because you're duplicating support. Like, if I'm looking at this race, and Warren has been losing all of these states, well, she's pretending to be Sanders, and I get everything that I want out of the real thing. I don't have to go for the echo. And so when there are all of these other people in the race, and I want this guy, a lefty, to finally win, and I think this lefty has the best chance of beating Trump, I'm going with that lefty, meaning I'm going with Sanders. If you just say, let's just say it was just you, Sanders, and Warren, then Warren has a better shot because she can, for the most part, ape him relatively effectively from somebody who's not necessarily paying all that much close attention. These look amazing for Sanders. Biden is doing well in 2 states. So he's doing well in, one state, Alabama. And apparently Minnesota, 538, is giving that as a toss-up. Don't get cocky. This doesn't take into account the rig factor. I call it the rig quotient, or the rig coefficient. Just, if these elections get close, it's just going to be like Iowa, where these guys take every liberty and opportunity they can to push it in a particular direction in order to ding Sanders. The media would try to cast it in a particular way to boost someone else up in order to ding Sanders. Now, just like Trump, this may not work. And it doesn't necessarily seem to be working at this moment, but we've only gone through 2 elections. And, we'll see the collective freakout on either Super Tuesday or if he wins, it takes Nevada, especially if it looks like he's going to take South Carolina and Biden is going to take an L. Few predictions. Biden is toast. He's toast. His electability was his only argument. That argument is fallen flat. If he loses South Carolina, he is definitely toast, and he can, for the most part, resign right there. The majority of Biden's support goes to Sanders, believe it or not, because, again, the argument has to do with more electability. It's not entirely a policy thing. Now, that may not entirely be true, though, considering how people view Bloomberg. But again, I think Bloomberg is one of the weakest candidates in the race. Money is his only superpower in that case. But that money can be used for all sorts of ways to buy all sorts of endorsements and to effectively suck away staff, suck away support, blanket the airwaves with ads. Fact is, we've never seen an oligarch just outright try to purchase the presidency in this particular way, in this blatant of a payoff. So it's hard to know. You make this argument, dollars versus pitchforks. We've never seen this many dollars. Let's say it that way. So I don't put it past Bloomberg, and I do think Bloomberg is the Democratic Party's failsafe. But Biden is toast. Warren, the problem with Warren is that the guy who she needs to get out the race to have her best chance is Sanders, and he's not going anywhere. And the question for Warren is, why are you here? I don't understand it. I think the public at this point don't understand it. She's losing race after race after race badly. And again, the question keeps lingering, why are you here? If you really want big structural change, then the person who's going to deliver that is that guy. And at this point, the only thing you're doing in this race is trying to injure him, which means you don't really want big structural change. My argument has been that Warren is in this race as a sandbagger to essentially hit him in the knees and pull his numbers down just enough to allow somebody like a Joe Biden or Bloomberg to cross over the line to take it. It's not that I think she's without her own agency. I also think, however, she's a proxy for other forces in the Democratic Party that understood that Sanders was going to be a problem if he could consolidate the lefty or progressive vote. And having Warren in the race allows the splitting of that particular vote. I don't know if she's going to back him or not, or she's going to endorse him. It does seem like she's having money trouble at this point. Good. Kind of want to snuff her out in the sense of politically for her to get out the race. But I think people have made a choice. And I think in their mind, it's, I want a lefty to win. She's not up to snuff, nor do I think she can beat Trump. Her political instincts are atrocious. So Warren is toast. Pete is toast. Again, Pete and Klobuchar are not actual things. The fact that they can't get the black vote or the Hispanic vote is going to destroy them as they move from states beyond New Hampshire. So until Pete is pulling in 5% of the black vote and 5% of the Hispanic vote, I don't believe Pete Buttigieg is a thing. I just don't. Sanders will take Nevada. My suspicion is he takes South Carolina, or at the very least come in a close second in South Carolina. I could be wrong on that front, but I do think that's what's going to take place. If he takes South Carolina, at that point, Joe Biden's campaign is over. It just is. My concern is Bloomberg. Bloomberg cannot win the presidency, period. But the issue is not whether Bloomberg can win the presidency. The issue is, can Bloomberg stop Sanders from winning the presidency? Those two things are, they're different, but they amount to almost similar things, the same thing. Bloomberg will not get the votes of the left. You have people like one concentration camp less Sam Cedar and workwife Michael Brooks. Even they, who for the most part bitched and moaned and bellyhooed at everybody who wasn't supporting Hillary Clinton, now they're at the point, apparently forgetting what they were saying, the bullshit they were saying in their other videos in 2016. Now they're like, I don't know if I can vote for Bloomberg, man. I think I might just stay home. It's like, wow, what happened to Blue no matter who? My point is, if you're losing them, meaning the Democratic Party contingent of the left, then there's no way. I'm not buying that you can go across the finish line just shearing one entire section. I'll even go further. This will destroy the Democratic Party for a generation. In the same way that African Americans vote almost unanimously for Democrats, keep in mind that was previous history where you had a situation of right-wingers jumping into the Republican Party, African Americans knowing that's where the monsters live and we need to keep the monsters at bay. And for an entire generation, you had African Americans wed themselves to the Democratic Party, almost just on momentum from the civil rights movement in that particular era. You have younger African Americans now who are more skeptical of the party, but keep in mind that was an entire generation where they had the black vote lock, stock, and barrel through and through. What happens if Sanders wins a plurality and you have all of these young voters, all of these Hispanic voters that feel like they were just cheated? Will those young voters come back to the party, or will it leave a bad taste in their mouth again for the guy who they pushed for to get cheated twice and to have it being done so brazenly and so openly? This is important also. They keep saying Sanders is not a Democrat. Sanders is not a Democrat. And yet, when you ask people, which candidate shares your values, who do you think wins that? Sanders. Among Democrats, Sanders. Meaning even among Democrats, just by themselves, the overwhelming majority look at Sanders and says, yes, the things that he espouses are the things that I like. And even among just voters themselves, he even wins that beyond everyone else. If you want the person who could beat Trump, that's your guy. And not just that's your guy. Any attempt to hamper him, any attempt to hit him in the knees, any attempt to cheat him doesn't just lose. It also undermines the party going forward. There's a reason why the Democratic Party can't get any money, can't raise cash. And I think this goes to the Bloomberg issue. Bloomberg will lose. Don't misunderstand me. But Bloomberg, as what, the 8th richest man in the world, do you think Bloomberg is injured by Donald Trump being president? No. Do you think Pelosi, Schumer, any of these people are injured by Trump being president? No, not in the least. Nancy Pelosi has $100 million in the bank. The issue is class. The issue is not this notion of identity. The issue is class. Meaning the Democratic Party establishment, in the same way Corbyn, when he lost, you had all of these right-wing Blairites come out blaming him. They would do the exact same thing for Sanders' loss, and they would say it's Sanders' fault that we lost. From the standpoint of a Bloomberg going against Trump, Bloomberg losing doesn't hurt Bloomberg. And if anything, the fact that they were able to stop this kind of leftward shift in the Democratic Party itself is to his benefit. These guys, for the most part, just want to retain power. And this is the difference between these kind of third-way Democrats versus New Deal Democrats. Sanders representing more of a New Deal Democrat trying to reinsole the party. I'm just making the very basic point that the established power structure of the party is not injured one iota by Trump winning that race. And between Trump winning versus Sanders winning, I strongly suspect they would take Trump. So those are my predictions of what I think are going to take place. Dillial 357, these Warren attacks have gotten out of hand. Yes, they have. Yes, they have. Robin W. Bill de Blasio is endorsing Sanders this week. I saw that. And you're right about the Warren attacks. I had a video that I was going to do basically saying, why is Warren in this race? And, my early argument, especially to people like Ryan Grimm and some of these other types that would bolster her like Cenk Uygur, she's aping him for a reason. Part of the reason for aping him is to sap away his support. When it became clear that that wasn't going to work, meaning she started losing the liberal vote, she started losing the college vote, her monetary support starts to dwindle. When people realized she wasn't being serious about Medicare for all, when people realized she was flagrantly dishonest and disingenuous, her support collapsed. They looked at Sanders. He's viable. He's the first viable lefty in 40 years. That's our guy. When it became clear that her trying to ape him wasn't working and wasn't sufficiently sapping away his support to help somebody like a collapsing Joe Biden over the finish line, what did she do? She started attacking him. Outright, belligerently attacking him. And attacking him while saying his supporters are being belligerent. Pointed, using his name in her attacks on him, saying Sanders has a ceiling and all this other stuff. That woman came in 4th place in New Hampshire. And she's talking about Sanders as a ceiling. She came in, 3rd place in Iowa. And she's saying Sanders has a ceiling. I'm just saying, the level of projection here is astonishing. When somebody explains to me one state, just one state, that Warren has the potential for winning, then we can engage this. But right now, ultimately, that woman is not going to win any states. And considering that she is suffocating from the standpoint of cash, it makes these attacks look that much more pathetic and that much more desperate. If she was indeed a friend of the left, and if indeed she cared about big structural changes and that these guys were working in tandem, if you notice, the working in tandem only lasted until the point where Warren started losing. The moment that she started losing, she turned around and started to attack him relentlessly. He would have never done that to her. He has never done that to her. So you get this notion of caliber of person right off the bat. And again, what is the individual's intentions? Can you really make an argument, a legitimate argument, that the person is representing or trying to do the best interests of the left if that person is attacking the most viable candidate that the left has put up in 40 years? I don't think you can. Meaning, in the same way that Warren was appropriating the Native American culture for 40 years to her own political and, let's say, socioeconomic advantages, but didn't back Standing Rock when real Native Americans were getting their heads bashed in, I suspect it will be the same way for this. That ultimately, yes, she would appropriate Sanders to pretend to be Sanders, but then turn around and potentially not support Sanders, just like she didn't support him in 2016, and potentially will not support him now. I don't know if Warren is going to back Sanders or not, but I would not be shocked one iota if she does not endorse him. So, all right, this video has gone massively long, but there were a lot of polls that I wanted to get through today because there was a lot of information to cover, and I wanted to get across how dominant he's been in these various states, especially the ones that are coming up And especially when you hit Super Tuesday. And just so you can see it, this is Morning Consult. This will be the last one. When you get into Super Tuesday, 27 to 20, Gen Z, 52 to 11. Yang is not even in the race anymore, meaning this number might go up. Millennial voters, 43 to 60. Like, these numbers are so dominant. I mean, he's taken the Hispanic vote almost in a similar way that the black vote votes for Democrats. Like, it's extraordinary the amount that he's getting on these in these tallies. And it is a multiracial, diverse coalition. Black, white, gay, straight, trans, across the board. All of them have hit upon this notion that the issue is class. It's not this identity stuff. We can work in tandem on issues that materially benefit each of us in the sense of class. Because the fact of the matter is, I may not necessarily be able to understand each and everything about your particular experience. What I can, though, is understand this notion of class and how I and you operate within a society where we're all persistently vulnerable. We, as a collective, can come together and make our world about something significant, like cutting down on that level of vulnerability. No, there's no point to existence, and people can come to their own conclusions about what they want the world to be about. But all things being equal, if you had your druthers, would you want the world to be a more hostile place or a less hostile place? And considering that all of us, in many respects, are in a similar, if not the same boat, shouldn't we work together to ensure that boat is patched up and that boat can get us from point A to point B in due speed on a due course? My point is, the issue that brings and unites all of us are issues of class. When Obama, yes, Obama is black. By the same token, Obama also gave 95% of the income gains to the top 1%. Him being black didn't stop him from doing that. That's the kind of point that I'm making. Hillary Clinton being a woman would not have stopped her from doing something similar, nor did it stop her from giggling when Gaddafi was sodomized, and you can now buy a slave from Libya for like $400. The issue is class. And for the first time in a very long time, somebody is making that argument to the working class that the issue is class, that this class war has been enacted against you for decades. And because both parties were captured, the thing that you didn't want the public realizing was that a class war had already been enacted. It was already going on. We were already under siege. The catch is that everybody, for the most part, was on the same team, so they didn't necessarily bring it up. It wasn't brought up in media. It wasn't brought up in political circles. Instead, they picked fights over notions of that guy's sexist, that guy racist, that guy's etc. You don't abandon issues of identity. It's not that. But for the longest time, issues of identity has been used as a dodge for issues of economics. And it makes all the sense in the world. Your identity is personal and intrinsic to some degree to who you consider yourself to be. It's how we designate ourselves in this particular world where those things matter, and social hierarchy and standing. And so when somebody is attacking this aspect of you, then it makes all the sense in the world for you to lump yourself in with the team that, for the most part, gives voice to defending it. The catch here, though, is giving voice to defending it sometimes is not even being attacked. And other times, even though it is being attacked, or at the very least maligned, or has the potential to be, it's still being used as a dodge to avoid the real issue, or the issue that matters the most, which is how you and I materially get from point A to point B as we go through our life, and whether or not we want to be persistently vulnerable, or whether or not we want to work together as a collective to make our lives better. I'll leave it here. I'll be back in a moment. I have a few shows to catch up on today. Like, share, and subscribe.